right, everybody. Hey, thanks. Nice to be able to have the opportunity to talk to everybody and meet everyone. Looking forward to this showcase event. My name is Chad Gallagher. I'm the Vice President uh, of Commercial Engagement and Integration for the Small Business Consulting Corporation. Joining me is Bill Spengenthal. He is our Executive Vice President for Joint Base San Antonio operations. And we also have Josh Hoffman, who is my director of our PMO. And today we're going to talk a little bit about government communication, some things to expect as we, progress over the next 7 weeks. And mentors have been assigned to you from our SBCC team. We've already met with several companies already. Feel free to ask any questions that you have during those mentor sessions, as well as during this briefing. Bill and I are going to kind of play tag team as we go through this, so we'll get started. All right, so from our company are six individuals that have been assigned as mentors. I already introduced you to Bill and Josh and myself. We also have Mark Weatherington. If you watch Fox News, you'll probably see him on there all the time, especially with things going on in Iran right now. Mark used to be the deputy commander at Air Force Global Strike Command and is now one of our senior advisors. So I know he's been assigned to some companies. We have Jessica Cleaver, who's our Director of Federal Business Development Procurement, former contracting officer for the Air Force, and she'll be leading a couple of these workshops. And Dayton Wenzel, really the mastermind of the showcase event for Global Strike. And he's our Director of Tech Scouting and Vetting, and you'll see him in one of the follow-on workshops. So today we're just going to talk. Here's what we're going to discuss. Our reverse pitch, go a little bit over TRL and MRL just to make sure that everybody's operating from the same lexicon and same understanding. Some government expectations, the reliability, security, and sustainment, government system integration, and communication. Just so you're tracking, everybody that has been assigned a mentor or retired out of the Air Force. I have 30 years. Bill's got over 30 years. Mark Weatherington, 30 years. And we've dealt with government acquisitions throughout our career in one facet or another. And so the things we're talking to you about are from our military experience as well as our experience with SBCC. So, what is SBCC and why should you care? So, we are a defense contractor that is paid for by multiple different Air Force clients. So, we're with Air Force Global Strike Command, Installation Mission Support Command, Education and Training Command, Air Mobility Command, the logistics centers. And all of what we do are paid for on those government contracts. So, when we are working with companies, we are only working with companies that the government, that the Air Force has directed us to work with. And so anything that we do with you is completely free to you. You pay for none of it. If we are, let's say you were to work on an AFGSC SIBR sitter and you ask for our assistance, again, that is completely free. There are a lot of companies out there that I call them SIBR mills. They'll help small businesses get a SIBR, but they take a percentage of the contract award. We do not do that. Any awards that you get, completely yours to execute that contract. All of our services are already paid for by the federal government. Some of the things that we will do are help with the requirements refinement and problem curation. And then we will go out there and find companies to a bunch of different mechanisms that have technology or capability that could potentially solve a government problem. So the government customer will come to SBCC. We'll help them curate that problem, and then we'll go out to the marketplace to look for solutions. We also look at the national laboratories as well as other government agencies to see if they have a solution already that is has been worked on that maybe we can pull to our Air Force customer. Uh, in those initial steps, that's where we have partnered with Plug and Play to use their vast network of startups to see if any of those startup companies, some of which are on this call, can potentially solve a government problem. Throughout that, we are always looking at transition. For any company that's out there, one of your primary considerations is how do I get across the valley of death? How do I get that funding so that I don't die or I'm not reliant on one single contract? For those who have done business with the federal government before, you probably know that the federal government is slow. And the way that budgets work, it's not a great way to base the financial health of your company for the long term. So we are constantly pushing for dual use capabilities, those capabilities that are available for the commercial space that can be applied to the defense space. We'll look at transition. How do we get these into the program offices? How do we get long-term sustainment funding so you're not just getting across the valley of death, but also the cliff of death? Um, and then how do you get those go and no-go decisions for do we execute, do we extend an option year? Do we award a follow-on contract? Do we do look for bridge funding? Do you need venture capital? All those things we're looking at on behalf of the government to make sure that these small businesses that they do work with are able to adequately meet the requirements of that contract. And then we will work with the companies and the federal government for that long-term funding for sustainment, modernization, looking for ways to make it a program of record. If we need to assign a national stock number so that any government agency outside the Air Force can just go and buy it, we will work with those companies to do that. And again, that is completely free of charge to any company. No company is mandated to work with SBCC, but it is a free service for you. You do have the option to go direct and try to deal directly with the government agency, but that can be a challenge, especially for the small businesses. Any questions so far on what SBCC does?
Hey, Chad, a couple of
Yeah.
pylons. One is, within our company, so again, if the government selects to move forward with you, you get our services, but that includes professional program managers, professional contracting officers, former contracting officers, former acquisition officers, and a general officer slate that's pretty impressive to include a lot of these former 5/8s that are the plans, programs, and money folks. I did want to pile on with the money, right? So the cliff of death, everybody's familiar with the valley of death, but the DoD will walk you right up to a cliff and then kick you over. That happens, right? That is a challenge. And so as we think about timelines for getting your company, let's say, into a program of record, if we started today, we couldn't get you into the POM, the formal budgetary process, for probably 3 years. That's about how long it would take if we started today, because that's how far in advance the government works. So that's 3 years of funding that we need to assist you with, and you need to understand it is ahead of you. So even if you got a SIVER, that's 2 year money. There may be some gaps in there. So that's the kind of things that we will assist you with sort of along the way. I'll pause there and see if there are any additional questions, because money is always of interest to the team.
Okay, we'll move on. All right, so, oops, wrong direction. All right, so some of the things that are important to remember, especially for any company that has tried to get into the DoD space, or, a lot of companies will hire retired general officers and or retired Air Force or Army personnel and try to use those Rolodexes to be able to get an in so that they can get an audience with a senior leader. And we'll talk a little bit about making sure you get in and talk to the right people. Um, but it's more than just saying, hey, we have this great product. The Air Force has to go out and buy it. If there is not an emerging need that is there right now today, your pitch is probably going to fall on deaf ears because the staffs at these headquarters are so minimally manned, especially in times like now when we got several fights going on around the world. That unless it's a problem set that they're dealing with right now for the next 12 to 24 months, they're probably not even going to look at it. And so what one of the things that is important is try to figure out where the problem sets lie. They may not always be with Air Force Global Strike Command that you might have an in with. Maybe there's something in Air Education and Training Command that your solution, your technology is a better fit. You got to figure out how do you get that audience, but target a specific problem set. The showcase is the quickest, easiest way to get in. And many of you, well, all of you at least submitted for it. It at least shows you, in this case, five specific problem sets that Global Strike Command is dealing with right now, and that they're willing to put time and effort and money toward. It provides for that faster alignment. We're not worried about all that sales fluff. As you progress through this accelerator, we provided Jackie and Angie kind of the rubric that your presentation will be scored against. And very little of it, almost none of it, has anything to do with sales fluff. Okay. They don't care. All right. What we care about, or what the government cares about, is does your technology solve that problem set? And how well thought out is your technology? How far along in the technology readiness level is it? What is your manufacturing readiness level? Is it more than just PowerPoint deep, essentially? Uh, and why the government likes to go towards small business is because it's oftentimes cheaper and small businesses are willing to modify their technology to meet the immediate need of the federal government. If you go to a Boeing or a Northrop, the the return on investment for those large primes is just not there. Now, if you get into Air Mobility Command where they have what 600 different aircraft, maybe the return on investment for a Boeing to modify something is there. With Global Strike Command, they just don't have enough of the assets, right? And so we want to leverage your agility and your innovation and your speed to be able to meet that requirement at a better price point most times than what we get from a prime. Bill, you want to add on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've kind of been given the solution for the showcase, right? Make sure you answer the question and the requirements, right? And look at the scope that Global Strike is looking or is asking you to look at, because that's what you're going to get graded on. It's You have to be careful and not maybe take the Apple approach with the government, because sometimes you can bring a solution that the government didn't even know they needed, and they're very happy with it. But many times they're going to say, "Hey, I've asked you to help me with this requirement. That's what I'm looking for." So I would just be careful about understanding the need, focusing your solution and your pitch to solve that. And of course, if there's a little bit more, great. There's also additional opportunities throughout the event to have one-on-one conversations at different locations as well. So just hone that in. The other thing I would say is, and we'll hit it on the next slide, Chad will, be honest where you're at with your product, because the government will find out, and if you work with us, we will find out, and it's our job to let the government know if your PowerPoint be deep or not. So I think I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. But that quote on the left, having been a general officer that's seen hundreds of pitches, Not everybody comes to me with a solution to the problem that I ask them to bring.
Right. So for most of you, many of you, this is probably, standard. You understand this. Your manufacturing level is important for the government to know. For the pitch, for this initial showcase event, we're looking at, even though your technology, your solution, it may not be considered a prototype for your company. But for what we're bringing to Global Strike event for this is being treated as a prototype. So they're only looking for a small quantity, right? Out of the gate. There's about $3 million that have been set aside for this showcase event. 5 topics. You're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $700,000 if you're the winner of that for the initial go. All right. But what will be important to see is if you're saying that your technology readiness level is somewhere above a 7. Caller. Sorry about that. And it is ready to go today, and we can come to your company and buy it today. The next question is, well, how many can you make and how quickly? All right. Because if your company, I know that there's a few companies on here that have like 3 to 5 people, right? For this initial showcase, getting one of your widgets out the door, probably not a big deal. Well, what if we order 5,000 of them? Okay. How long is it going to take you to do that? And how are you going to get the manufacturing capability? What about your staffing issues? All those kind of things are things that we're going to be talking to you down the line as we move forward. So Josh's team from the project management side of the house are really going to be looking at TRL and MRL to see how fast can we go with this particular company. How much investment is the Department of War going to have to make if something is like a TRL 3, 4, or 5? How many years are we going to have to invest in this company? That's not to say that the government won't do that. We've been looking at things like one thing that comes to mind is a ionic propulsion engine for an aircraft. Well, when we started down that line, we were at like a TRL 2, and we've dumped millions of dollars into this thing. It's over a couple of years, it's like TRL 4 now. At some point, Global Strike Command is going to say, I'm out of Schlitz. I can't keep paying this bill. We need to transfer it to somebody else. Our team will work with your company to figure out who is the right entity to transfer that to. In many cases, it could be the Air Force Research Lab or somebody like that. But for this showcase event, we need to solve the problems now. So when you're giving your pitch, one word of advice: talk about TRL and MRL because that will indicate to the judges how fast they can go. Any questions on TRL or MRL? All right, cool. Spanky, over to you.
Oh, you bet. Well, and piling on that last one, obviously, if there's a demonstration that proves where you're at, that's nice, right? Because then you're backing up your words with the demo on what you have. So on communication writ large can go really well, or this could go awful. There's a limited amount of time to do your presentation. It would be a shame if you didn't give the government an opportunity to ask some questions to understand a bit more. But I will tell you right up front that if you come to the government with sort of standalone licenses, we don't interact with other products, i.e., we're not open on our architecture, it becomes a real challenge. When you think about the magnitude of all the platforms across the Air Force, we have become very siloed at times because of the one-off products that we've purchased. So I guarantee you some folks will be very concerned about your product and how it's going to integrate across the rest of the system. So just be cognizant of that. For certain software solutions, follow-on conversations will be Have you thought through the authority to operate? What systems does it need to interact? Do you have a plan for that depending on where you're at? These are questions that sort of naturally come across. In terms of communicating what you're doing, you can't assume that all of the folks you're speaking to have the same sort of technical knowledge that you have. I can guarantee you, if it's a senior leader like myself, it was like, hey, I might need some plain spoken language, right? And then let me follow up with some of the technical pieces and be prepared for that. But it can be easy to sort of talk over some of the team's heads. So do be careful about that. Please understand the customer, the end user, because the idea is we want to get tools in the hands of our warfighter. So understanding the mission necessity, understanding the domain that is going to be used. Some of you may not have any experience with the Department of Defense, but leverage us to understand the mission a little bit more as you're talking to the mentors, because we can sort of coach and assist you with that language as well. We did talk a little bit about not overselling. I will tell you that people are pretty good about digging, and it doesn't take long to dig into a pitch to realize, okay, are the words on paper matched with the work that's going on behind the scenes? So just be fair and honest with, sort of where you're at and what it's going to take. We can assist you with some of that messaging. We're not going to write your briefs by a long shot, but if you have some questions or even organization of your communication, let us know. I'll pass on to you what I've told to the folks that I'm mentoring. When you pitch to the government, make sure you understand the timelines, leave time for questions. If you do a quick, here's who we are, here's the credible team that we have, we understand what the problem statement is. You specify that. You clearly articulate your solution, and then talk about what it's going to take to implement that solution, and then finish up your brief with, here's what we need in order to continue moving on. To me, that's a very successful discussion with the U.S. government. It sort of walks from the initial introduction all the way into here's our ask at the other end, and you'll do really well. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions, see if Chad or Josh have anything they'd like to add on to that.
The only thing I would add is at the end of your presentation to the government, make sure you clearly articulate your ask. What do you need? All right. So I told you $3 million set aside across five topics, roughly 600,000 a pop. All right. But don't limit yourself to just the 600K. Be very honest with what you can do with $600,000, but end it with, hey, I'd like to get into a business to business approach with perhaps another company that is already working with the Air Force. Or, hey, for 600K, we can get you to this and get the TRL to this, but with another $1.5 million, $2 million, we could really do this, right? And be very specific with that, because I said that we got $3 million that are set aside. There's several $100 million that they have to play with. All right. And so money is not always the problem. I know I see Cynthia on here from BST, right? And they have played this game a long time with Global Strike Command. And so there are other ways to get money. If the government really likes your product, there are a lot of ways to be able to get money. It's not the money that is the problem. It's the slowness of the process. And so if can plan ahead of time and you say, hey, I can do this with 600K right now, but over the course of 2 years, if I had another $2 million, $5 million, we could get after that. And maybe we work congressional inserts, all those kind of things that private companies have the ability to do. So I just throw that out there when it comes to the money.
Absolutely, Chad. It's funny, the longer we talk, the more you remember. Some of you have contract mechanisms right now. That is worth letting the government know, because if they're able to contract with you sole source or right away, uh, that's a good thing to know. Otherwise, getting on contract can be very difficult at times. And Chad mentioned how long it is, so I wouldn't hide that fact. The other thing that I'd be prepared to discuss is I would always ask companies, if I gave you more money, could you go faster? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. Like this is the sort of timeline. Or hey, after phase one, yes, we could scale quicker with more money. So just think through some of those questions.
Okay, we'll move on. All right. So some of the things that we need to, again, during your pitch, some things that might be important to talk about. How can your technology, reduce that downtime, reduce the amount of time that we have to spend doing maintenance on a system? Predictive maintenance is, one of the topics is uh, rechargeables for electric vehicles, electric support equipment. You know, think about it's bigger than just operating in Shreveport, Louisiana, or Rapid City, South Dakota. What if I have to operate at Diego Garcia or a place that's currently getting attacked by Iran? Um, how do I make sure that my technology has the ability to make things easier and save lives on behalf of the Air Force? Um, Making sure that you are familiar with all the mill standards. All right. If you have a solution, but it violates a mill standard or doesn't even come close to meeting a mill standard, that's not going to be a winning solution. Um, and those life cycle costs. We already talked about things, we want open architecture systems. How do I make sure that I don't get stuck in some kind of vendor lock? Everybody wants to protect their IP, and we're going to hit this numerous times. But from a government standpoint, while the government appreciates, intellectual property and data rights, the government wants to move quick, right? And the government does not want to be constrained and not be able to move or modify things simply because of IP. Security obviously is a huge issue, right? The topics that we are discussing during this showcase event can very quickly get to the secure realm, right? Even though this is an, an unsecure event, we do have CUI. Some things are going to be there, but look at cybersecurity. Look at those things. If you have people within your company and you should win, can you get a security clearance? Do you already have a security clearance? If you do, that means the government can go fast. Um, are you CMMC compliant? If you don't know what it is, search it up. It's pretty easy to figure out what it is. It's not easy to get it. All right. And it can get costly. But in certain circumstances, you're going to have to be compliant. For all the companies on here, I hope that you've already at least registered with SAM.gov. SAM.gov will tell Global Strike that you are even eligible to get a contract. So make sure you do that. And then that sustainment stuff. I already talked about for Cynthia, you don't have to put that in the presentation. Just be ready to ask the question. Usually, your slide deck that you will give your initial 15-minute pitch on, the government will have a copy of that. You could put it in the backup slides, you could put it there, but that's where I would put it. Um, when we're talking sustainment, obviously austere locations. Within Global Strike Command, we have austere locations. If you've ever been up to Minot, North Dakota, it gets 60 below zero there, and there's snow on the ground for about 8 months out of the year. If your solution cannot operate in extreme cold or hasn't even been tested against extreme cold, you may want to identify that, especially things like batteries, right? If you're talking a battery type system or a counter UAS system or additive manufacturing? Can it withstand extreme temperatures? Can it be used in austere locations? Can it fit on a basic pallet that would go on to a C-17? Know those dimensions. Um, and then how well does it integrate with current systems? I think this is like the third time we've said it just in this 30 minutes we've been talking to you, because the last thing that the government wants to do is say, this is some real cool tech, but I got to completely rewire my B-52 that's 60 years old to be able to accommodate this piece of technology, right? So things to think about there. Spank, you got anything you want to add?
No, I mean, it's funny because our next slide is going to talk a little more about integrating with systems. So I will tell you that for aircraft systems, the aircraft testing is not insignificant in terms of how long it takes. So there's a few folks on here that I know are already very intimate with that, but you want to talk about a slow process. Getting things approved on an aircraft can be very challenging. And Chad's absolutely right on the austere locations. Having spent 4.5 years at Grand Forks, North Dakota, yeah, launched in minus 45 ambient, 6 aircraft, right? It's got to work.
Yeah,
Uh,
just a couple things here. Be familiar with uh, the requirements for what Air Force Global Strike has. Every installation within Air Force Global Strike will be a nuclear installation. But there are things going in place right now to make all 8 installations, all 9 wings, nuclear. When you're talking about dealing with nuclear weapons, there are additional certifications that have to be done on your technology. Dash 12, hero compliance. Uh, the picture that you see on the screen. This, if you're doing anything that has to do with human beings and we need to test out with a human, going through human testing is extremely cumbersome. We can help you with all of those certifications and ATO. Anybody who's ever tried to get a authority to operate on a government system, that's about $1 million right there, and at least a year long process. Um, we can help you navigate all of that, but be thinking about that on your pitch, because that's what the judges will be thinking about. Of okay, how many other certifications am I going to have to get? Are we going to have to get CMMC? Are we going to have to get Hero, Dash 12, human performance testing? Any of those kind of things are going to matter. All right, we talked about this before, and this is over to you, Spanky.
yeah, well, I mean, we have kicked this one around a couple of different times. The number of times we've been sold on a one-off or we see a one-off, that's why we're hammering this home, because the interoperability across a massive enterprise is really important, and we don't have the money to necessarily take your standalone solution for your platform and then migrate that into every other platform in the Air Force. There's just not enough money for that. So you do really need to understand how to integrate with other systems along the way. This is also an opportunity to team, right? If you don't have some of this expertise, there may be another company around that can assist you with some of this. We've seen great success with small businesses partnering up with other small businesses to be successful. And I am not a big get licensed to death kind of person. I don't think that's necessarily what most of y'all have, but there are a few software solutions out there as well. So just be careful on that. And I will say right here, because this sounds really difficult to work with the government. I will state up front, it is really difficult to work with the government. So thank you all for taking that step. But it can also be incredibly rewarding, and no greater feeling than to know that you are putting solutions in the hand of warfighters who are defending our nation. It's really pretty awesome. So even though some of this is doom and gloom and you may get a little bit more before it's done, hang in there. The juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah, and on what Spanky is saying, I mean, you look at the fight going on with Iran and some of the recent threats that have come out that are relatively new that we didn't necessarily expect coming out of Iran. What the Department of War has done is think of the unmanned aircraft threat that's come out in a very, very short period of time. One of the small businesses that we had been working with, and it's been kind of slow, overnight dropped $46 million on them overnight to say, hey, we want to try your solution. We're going to partner it with a couple other capabilities. And how quickly can you do it? Here's $46 million overnight. And so it can be when you're talking the B-52, the B-52 is going to stay operational for another 20, 25 years. Looking for ways to keep that awesome aircraft operational and able to operate in contested environments is great. So a lot of technologies are there, but it can be overnight that your fortunes can change. Uh, when you are when you're giving your pitch, when you're not just for the showcase event, but when you're talking to the government, some things to pay attention to: your technical merit. When you see the rubric that you're going to be graded on for this showcase, 40% of your grade is on technical merit. What is the scientific data that you have to prove what you're claiming your technology can do? Have you tested it? Where have you used it? What kind of use case scenarios have you put it up against? What kind of threats have you considered against your system? Um, is there soundness to the claims that you make during your pitch? The last thing you want to do is claim something during a 15-minute presentation, have a contract award, and then find out you're unable to meet the requirements. That has not happened much at all over the last several years that we've been working with companies, but make sure you're very clear on your approach. Innovation, where can you take it to the next level? All right. Spanky talked about teaming with other entities. A counter UAS system that we had a great tower that was made for communications and Wi-Fi on the flight line, bringing 5G capability. But when we looked at this tower, we were able to throw 4 or 5 different sensor packages on it, plus a defeat mechanism against on it. And guess what? Now I can use this to shoot down enemy drones coming into an airbase. Within 24 hours of installing it at one of our bases, they had a successful engagement here in the U.S. Um, what is your risk mitigation plan? Make sure you address that. If there are risks, let's say supply chain risks with any of the components for your tech, talk about that. What is your plan to get past any supply chain issues? I would not want to be an oil company right now trying to figure out how I get through the Straits of Hormuz. I don't know if they have a good risk mitigation plan for that. But think about it from your supply chain issue. And then quantifiable data. The more quantifiable data to show how your technology actually works will score much higher with the judges than just making a claim with nothing to support it. Understand who you're talking to. I will give you some free gouge right now. When you're pitching to the government, you're going to have a B-52 expert that's going to be one of the judges. You're going to have somebody from the Rapid Sustainment Office on at least a couple of these topics who are experts in additive manufacturing. And you're going to have Air Mobility Command operators and maintainers for the AMC specific project. So you are going to have people who know this business when you're standing up there. Be ready to ask questions. Make sure you give sufficient time for them to ask you some questions. So if you get 15 minutes to give your pitch, save a couple minutes, but make sure you understand who in that chain has authority and responsibility. And this goes for more than just the showcase. If you have an awesome technology and you reach out and talk to Staff Sergeant Snuffy or Captain Schnickelfitz, all right? Staff Sergeant Snuffy and Captain Schnickelfitz do not control the checkbook, and they do not have the authority nor the access to the money. If you are just trying to get something at a single base or a single wing, they do not have the ability to scale or get you across the valley of death. It's going to have to be at the MAGCOM, and it has to be somebody who has access to the purse. So you want to know who those people are. If you're working with SBCC and plug and play, we're going to get you those answers. We're going to get you those names. We're going to get you those people. If you go out there on your own, you may find out who it is, but it's a risk that you just got to be ready to navigate to make sure you know who you're talking to and ultimately who controls the money. Spanky, anything to add on that?
So I cannot stress enough the ability to get on contract and know who has the money, right? You hit on it. So we are not going to go into all of it here, but Jess, our partner, will talk a little bit about the contracting piece. We can discuss a little more about who controls the money across the Air Force in some of our one-on-ones. We could even talk about it a little bit here, but the 5.8 plans and programs has money. Some young airman, who's asking you to come in as some wing has no money. So you do need to be careful about getting your hopes up and getting too excited when the wrong person gets really interested. The wrong person's interest doesn't translate to money. It could translate into a lot of time and energy that costs you money and not necessarily sort of sustains you. So very good points, Chad. I can't emphasize those enough.
All right. That is the end of what our prepared comments for you. We are available to answer any questions you may have.
I got a quick question. So hey, good to meet everyone. Bernard with Black Sand here. We're building space domain awareness sensors and software, and then counter UAS sensors and software as well. Um, Quick question for you, kind of going off your last topic. If we already have four different operational units that want our technology, but don't have the funding for that, what is the best way that you suggest us to kind of connect them with? The bean counters that do have the power of the purse.
So are they global strike units or are they all over the
Yeah, it's
place?
separate. So one of them is the JTAC training unit for Air National Guard on the West Coast. The other two are Space Force units. So one Space Force, one here in Hawaii, and then the other one is Space Forces Indo-Pac.
Okay. So the simple answer without knowing all the details, they need to reach up to their major command A58. All right. The A58, most of those like the JTAG guys, I'm familiar with them. They operate under the three. The three has organized train and equip responsibility, but they have very little funding ability to sustain and modernize their kit. So they're still going to fall under the A58. Even if you're working with a special ops unit, right? And special ops, AFSOC have different acquisition authorities than the rest of the Air Force, but they still need to get up to AFSOC headquarters to be able to access the people with requirements. And the requirements divisions or directorates at the major commands are the ones that control the funding. So, Snake, you want to elaborate more on that?
You bet. So the requirements will go into the A5s. There's usually an A5R requirement. They'll validate the requirement, and when they validate the requirement, the A8 part of the command then can fund it if there's money available. The one thing I'll add on, you said it was the JTAC Air National Guard.
Yes, sir.
Little, right. So the Guard is a little bit different. There's the 50 plus guard units across the different states and entities are they all run a little bit differently. The nice thing is sometimes they have different funding options, through the state, which so that one may be slightly different. But on the Space Force side of the house, they need to move up to their 5.8 at the headquarters, and that would be the right way to go.
Okay.
One thing that I would caution you to just be careful about is, it's relatively easy to submit for a AFWorks SIBR opportunity, open topic, right? Are you familiar with SIBRs and sitters?
Yes, sir. We're about to start our phase two with NASA, and so that gives us a cross-agency phase threes, and that's exactly what we're trying to figure out here is how do we either do phase three from NASA to Air Force or to the Space Force, or maybe both if we can swing it.
Well, the good thing is since you've successfully completed a phase two, you own the data rights for 20 years, right? Under the SIBR construct. Any federal government agency can capitalize on your successful phase two and go award a phase three to you. The
Yeah.
challenge, though, is they have to know about it.
Hmm.
So even within the MAGCOMs that we support, things that are done at the unit level are not always communicated up to the major
Correct.
command level. And so they
Correct.
don't even know about it. And then nobody else knows about it because AFWorks isn't advertising it.
Right.
So you just got to make sure that whatever organizations you are working with, especially unit level, are communicating up to their command.
Yep.
Okay, and it's actually just we just finished the phase one, so we're about to start a phase two. But from my
Right.
understanding, it looks like the chat here said it too, that we can go straight to phase three across agencies.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
To follow up on that, we have a phase three, but we haven't had much traction beyond the original organization, Air Force Global Strike Command. Any suggestions on how we make traction cross-agency to get more support?
So part of the challenge is that the major commands do not always talk to each other, right? And uh, I, at risk of sounding like I'm pushing SBCC, uh, what I will tell you is we are one of the few entities that are cross MAGCOM, right? So we, the fact that we are with Air Force Installation Mission Support Command, IMSC, down in San Antonio. They are responsible for every Air Force installation from a care and feeding type activity, right? Getting into an organization like IMSC, I'm very familiar with your technology and the projects that you have, Cynthia, but you know, your project manager, I think it's Ken Black from us, he can definitely help you with that.
Yeah, it is
And
Ken.
at least
Okay,
getting the word out there to other match comps.
awesome. Thanks.
I was going to resort to picking people and asking you all questions, but we did get a couple, so I don't think I have to go that far.
Well, Spanky, you got any closing comments in our last 8 minutes if there are no other questions?
I think on my closing comments, I would like to just say thank you to everybody for being a part of this, right? This is important work. These topics are significant. We don't have all the answers to them, and that's why we're reaching out. I will tell you, I have a personal warm spot in my heart for small businesses. I love how hard you work. I know you work for beer and pizza money, and I know you have aspirations to do great things. And our nation needs it. We have to expand the industrial base. Um, Congress overwhelmingly supported the next 5 years of SIBR, or more, which shows where they're at as well. So just please know it's going to be difficult. At times, it's going to be difficult, maybe the entire time. But thanks for the work that you're doing. We'll do our best to help you help you through this program. But appreciate what you're doing on behalf of our government.
Josh, any comments from you, sir?
The only thing is for you mentioned earlier about additional contracts and kind of hitting that in your guys' pitches. If you guys are doing that, if you keep it focused to the topic at hand, if they're irrelevant to how it can impact the showcase, I wouldn't really hit it. That's just my perspective. And if you guys are talking to other entities that can help transition this technology, I think that would be very value added to talk about those partnerships. So to your point, Bernard, where you're saying that you had JTAC and you had the Space Force folks, if you have technical points of contact in all those different areas under all the same technology, connect those people together. I mean, you can do that, from your company's perspective and say, hey, do we all want to go on a phase three? Because, as long as it derives, completes, or extends that phase three and that original contract that you're working on, you can attack that as a single unit, right? We have a StratFi currently where we are working with Space Force. They have some money in the kitty, and then Global Strike has money in the kitty and some other folks. And so, but now who owns the primary stake in it, right? Who is going to be the decision maker? Who gets to pick the requirements and the KPIs for that project? And those things are going to be hashed out later on. But that's an angle and an avenue that you can go for your question. But outside of that, that's all I got.
Roger that. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Josh, thanks. Yeah, my closing comments very similar. Uh, Thank you for what you do. Thank you for participating in this. Bill, Josh, and I have been doing this for, 4.5 years now. And, we all three of us believe we're able to get things done much quicker out of uniform than we ever could while we were in uniform. And that's pretty sad to say as a retired two-star colonel and senior master sergeant, right? I mean, the we are looking to go fast. And so when you are talking to the government, emphasize how you can go fast, how you can solve the problems quickly. If you pay attention to a lot of these large primes, um, they're either uh, cost overruns, they're way over schedule, and it doesn't do anything for us. That is why small businesses, and if you look at recent memos that have come out of the Department of War, they are specifically targeting small business effort. One, to rebuild our defense industrial base, but to go quickly and to stay within cost and to stay within timelines. Um, we are trying to figure out how can we make best posture the Department of War so we can fight tonight. We have the three of us have spent our entire career in uniform in the Middle East, or fighting that fight. What the Department of War is facing today is very different. Unfortunately, we find ourselves right back in the Middle East, but I mean, it's a very different kind of fight. Emphasize how we can fight tonight, how we can even look at potential threats that maybe we're not even thinking about, and use Iran, use the lessons we're learning in the Ukraine. All these kind of things will help your pitch. And ultimately, we want to see you succeed in May when you're here on the ground in Shreveport. So thank you very much. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Miss Angie.